various celebrities or executives at big firms, what they'll do is they'll hire analysts to go online and open source, dark web, deep web, see if they could build up kind of like pretending, see if you can find my house, where my kids go to school, what car I'm driving. If you were planning attack, how would you do it? And they would hire someone to do that. And most of the time, just analysts working in the company can easily do that. They can set up blueprint. They'll see where their CEO works, where their kids go to school, what cars they're driving, how many cars they have, how many houses they have. And so they can, they do that in order to be more proactive.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the Dre and Smiley Inner Circle podcast.
Man, Smiley, there's so many different types of guests that we've had on the podcast. All of them are interesting in their own right. Today's guest is no different. This is one of the topics that I think you would agree you and I both have a real interest in because it's almost like it's mysterious. It's almost kind of exciting. It's kind of like James Bondish type thing. Uh, and so I'm really excited to have our guest today. Our guest, the way I would describe her based on the research I've done, a few adjectives come to mind. One is very strategic, collaborative, and I think the most important word is empowering through the work she does as it relates to women in the space that she's in. She's in cybersecurity. Today's guest is Mary D'Angelo. Mary, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. So here's the first question, and you probably get this all the time. I think I have an idea of what cybersecurity is. Um, and I'm going to say it's just making sure that people can't get into my network. Am I correct on that? Break that down for us.
Yeah. So basically the role I'm in, the space I'm in is cyber threat intelligence. So we're gathering the right amount of intel that's timely, actionable, and relevant so that you can stop or bad actors getting into your organization. But the idea behind it is to be more, you want to be more strategic and more upfront as opposed to like taking a back seat, right? And letting them come to you. You want to be prepared. So that's the beauty behind cyber threat intel is to help you be prepared before these attacks even get.
Okay. So in CTI, cyber threat intelligence,
Mhm.
how did you get into that? Did you, when you were in high school, realize, you know what? It's a big industry out there. Let me get into this niche here called CTI, and we're going to make
No,
it happen there. Yeah.
no, I had my background is actually in marketing.
Okay.
I had really no familiarity with cybersecurity. It was only because after undergrad, I moved out to the East Coast for a job working at a cybersecurity company. But at the time, I was mostly on the marketing and sales side. And then I got recruited into a company that specialized in dark web threat intelligence. And it was there that I did more of, more hands on learning and like going through the different dark web forums and marketplaces that I built more experience around dark web threat intelligence. And then now I'm at a company that focuses on cyber threat intelligence as a whole and making it because there's so many types of threat intel and it can be very overwhelming. And so now just making sense of, the chaos of threat intel.
Yeah. So, okay. So it's all still confusing to me. So you mentioned at the start that one of the keys to cyber threat intelligence is to be timely, to be relevant, and I think you use the word proactive. Is that right? And so catching it early, kind of
Yeah.
anticipating what could happen before it happens.
Yeah.
So
So
what does
timely,
that look
accurate, and
like?
relevant.
Okay, timely, accurate.
Yeah, because the thing, I think a lot of people confuse threat intelligence with data. And it's not the same thing. In fact, sometimes data can just be useless noise, right? And it's more of a distraction from, how teams are trying to operate, right? What their end goal is to stop these cyber attacks. And so if you structure cyber threat intelligence in order for it to be effective, you want to be timely, accurate, and relevant. But then it's also broken down into different parts too. You have your strategic intelligence, you have your tactical intelligence, and your operational intelligence. Your strategic intelligence is mostly for, it's more big picture. You're looking at what are the big main threat actors out there? Who are they targeting? What industry are they focusing on? What's the major attack vectors? And then you have your operational, which focuses on okay, these are the certain types of threat groups that are targeting my organizations. This is their playbook. This is how they operate. This is who they typically go after. And then lastly, you have your tactical threat intelligence. And that's more of like, how do I respond right now to an attack? What information do I have right now that's going to help me stop this attack from currently happening?
Makes
So,
sense. Makes
yeah,
sense. So I'm going to pass the Smiley here in a second, but okay, timely, accurate, relevant. Did I get that right?
yes.
Okay. So with AI, does that make
Mhm.
your job easier or harder? Here's why I ask that. I'm thinking back maybe 5, 10 years ago. I imagine there's some place in the world where there's 50 people sitting at terminals trying to break into Acme Medical, right? And there's just keep trying to keep trying to keep trying. Acme Medical has a team of maybe 4 or 5 specialists that, look for these attacks and then they shut them down as they come. It's kind of like blocking them as they come. With I wonder if that now is like perhaps millions of attacks at once, and they only have to get lucky one time.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, at Acme Medical, they have to ensure no one ever gets in even once. So with AI, does it make that job harder for you, easier for you? Break that down for me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of misinformation around AI as well. So both in some cases, so the bad guys are using AI and so are the good guys, right? So it's like it's basically a war against AI. In some cases, it's useful for us, especially for, analysts, cyber threat analysts who are trying to stop these attacks because now they have AI that can help automate more of those menial tasks, makes it quicker to might be able to pick up things that an analyst might not be able to see or does so at a faster rate, right? Whereas it is also very difficult too, because then you have the bad guys that are using AI to forestall these attacks, and it becomes very, very difficult for for the good guys. So and there's so many conversations about this going on right now because there's so much we're still learning a lot about it, and even just in cyber threat intelligence, there's a lot of arguments being made about how AI is not good for cyber threat intelligence. It goes against the whole like philosophy of cyber threat intelligence. But like from a practical point of view, it is extremely helpful as long as it's still you have a human that can authenticate it, make sure that it's not just automatically responding without the okay from a human side, because you need both. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
One question I have is this is fascinating because you say you started out as marketing and then you
Mhm.
moved into cybersecurity, which is for a lot of our listeners who may have different professions now, but they want to get into cybersecurity. How was that transition when you said, okay, they tapped you or you decided you were going to go and be a cybersecurity analyst or expert? Did you learn Python? Did you have to go do some coding? Did you do cyber threat people monitor or do you code or what was that like, the steps from marketing to this cybersecurity threat person?
Well, so that's funny because a lot of people in our industry have similar backgrounds to me where because cybersecurity is relatively new, right? So they didn't, at least when I was in undergrad, we didn't have a course of it at the time. And so most people come through this through unconventional paths. I think for me, though, since cyber threat intelligence is less technical in the sense that I'm not coding, I'm not, you know, building different sites. There's some psychology behind it, right? Because you're tracking threat actors. You're trying to understand their motives. You're following the breadcrumbs they might lead so that you can build a better picture of who these groups are, who they're about to attack, right? So honestly, I think marketing was very good for me in order to I think, especially in CTI, it helps to get diverse perspectives and things. And I think that's one of the issues with CTI right now is that there comes from a lot of just uh, security analysts who move straight into CTI. And it's not the same thing because CTI has, as I mentioned, more psychology behind it. And you have to have a different way of thinking because you're analyzing these groups and these individuals and this data that's coming in order to make it actionable and relevant for, to actually stop the bad guys. So for me, it was, I don't, the training that I had, it was kind of funny. My friends always joke, it's like being thrown into like, it's like Navy SEAL, you're just being thrown into the midst of it and just hoping you can swim and survive. But yeah, that's kind of what I did. But mine was mostly focused on dark web. So, which was very, very cool. I think everyone agrees it's kind of cool. There's a lot of misinformation around that as well. But because it was so interesting and fascinating, I was able to pick it up very quickly.
Can you define for our listeners the dark web? Because when I hear dark web, I always
Hmm.
go to like Dre mentioned James Bond. I go to the Jason
Yeah.
Bourne, these Hollywood movies. So you got the Hollywood
Yeah.
version of what the dark web is, and you're trying to buy a nuclear bomb on the dark web versus the
Mhm.
reality of dark web. So can you level set the listeners as to what is the dark web and not how you get there, but who's over there,
I
or is
want
it
to know how to
really
get
that
there
dark?
too.
Well,
Tell me, I'm
anyone
asking
can get
for a
there.
friend.
Why does he want to get there? Yeah, why
Yeah,
would he
yeah,
want to
yeah.
be on the dark
Yeah, my
web?
friend wants to know. And while you're doing that, Mary, in all seriousness, as you detail what that is, the dark web, I've heard of something called the clear web and the deep web. If you could break those down for us, those
Yeah, I
three.
think that's actually a really good place to start. So you have the clear web, which is you basically just think of Google. It's your structured internet, right? You go to Google, type for anything you're looking for. It's very standard. Then you have your deep and your dark web. Now, deep web is actually the majority of the internet, which most people don't know. I think it's like 90% of the internet. This is sites that are blocked by paywalls. So you have to gain like medical records or you have to gain access through like a login credentials in order to gain access into some of these sites like Telegram or something. That's considered deep web. Dark web is a subset of that and it requires special software to gain access to it. The most commonly known software is called Tor. Tor stands for the onion router. And basically, the reason it's named that way is because it's so many different layers that helps with the anonymity so that you can get into it and no one basically knows who you are, right? That's why people are on the dark web. I will say though, the dark web, most people don't know this, but anyone can download Tor. Like you can download Tor right now if you wanted to. The danger though is once you're in it, it's very slow. It's very, very, very slow. Because it's all volunteer led groups that run the infrastructure behind it, right? And the way that the infrastructure is made is so that you go through many different layers. So you have your first node, middle node, and then your exit node. And those are what makes it anonymous, right? So it's like basically if I send you a letter, let's say I want to say send Dre a letter, but I want it to be anonymous, I would send one to Smiley. Maybe that one would go to a different person and then to another person and then finally got to Dre. So Dre would have no idea it was from originally from me. And that's kind of how the infrastructure works for the dark web. It's most people don't realize this, but it was actually founded by the US military. I think it was the Navy. The reason they built it was more for research purposes and free speech because there are countries that don't, unlike the States, they don't have the same laws around free speech. And so it was built so that people within those countries had a platform where they could speak up. And it really helps with like journalistic efforts as well, reaching out to these individuals. But now it's devolved. I mean, I think the latest stat is like 98% of it is all used for crime, like drugs, guns, trafficking, anything you could think of.
Mm.
So the way it was interesting with the way you described the first node, second node, third node, it's almost like the hobbits with Middle Earth, Upper Earth, the different layers of different things. I'm making a Hollywood comparison. But as a cyber threat expert, are you protecting your clients from clear web, deep web, dark web, or all three webs?
Yeah, so that's where cyber threat intelligence, and there's so many different facets of intel. So the ones that I focus on is your open source intel, so intel that is publicly available to anyone, and then your dark web intel. You also have, there's a million of other pieces of intel, like when it comes to radio waves or signal intelligence, things like that. Um, for just the purposes of simplicity of today, we have open source, which is very important. So tracking, and the whole purpose behind this is trying to, track these threat actors to figure out when the next attack is, so that you can keep your organization safe. So you need all modes of intel in order for it to be, very effective.
And the way you define the webs, I love when you call clear web is Google. Well, now we're all in a chat GPT and we're all into
Yeah.
Claude and we're in a Gemini. And
Mhm.
Perplexity. Are those clear webs or is
Mhm.
that clear AI? And then there's your AI specifically for Tor that's like dark web AI, or it's not that
Yeah,
stratified
so
yet?
they do have, so that's all that would still all fit under the clear web because it's publicly available, it's accessible, it's indexed. It's easy to anyone, anyone can find ChatGPT online, right? So I will say with Tor, there is, so again, bad guys have their own versions of AI as well. And I don't remember the name, so I'd have to double check this, but I think they have like dark GPT or something like this, but they have their own version of AI that doesn't have as many protections that we have on it. That helps them. So if they were, building their attacks and gathering resources for it, they would use their own sort of AI for that.
One last question before I turn it over to Andre is when you, the way you described it, my daughter was real big into Criminal Minds. And the
Oh,
Criminal
okay.
Minds, they get into the psychology of the criminal in order to prevent the criminal from
Hmm.
doing things. And when you described it, when you said marketing people coming in or different industries or different personalities, roles coming into it, because you're getting into the psyche of the criminal to try and predict where you said follow the breadcrumbs. Would you say you're more like a Criminal Minds expert? 'Cause the way you described it, you're like an investigator, a detective
Yeah.
in the web. You're trying to detect like you're a sleuth. You're like Sherlock
Yeah.
Holmes in the cyber world, trying to find out where, hypothetically, the Dre guy is gonna do something nefarious in the world. Is that correct?
Well, that's
No,
gotta be
that's
me.
It's always the guys from Nashville.
No, that's actually a perfect way to put it because that's exactly what you're doing is you're trying to understand these different um it's kind of funny because like when you're talking about the dark web in particular, it's a bunch of criminals, right? And so obviously they don't have a moral code. I mean, sometimes they have their own moral code, which we can get into in another time. But they lie, right? They're constantly lying, and so that also makes it a little bit more difficult to see how genuine if some like, I don't know, if a threat actor is saying like, "Hey, I have credentials for Spirit Airlines," which is actually a true story, but they're like, "I have credentials for Spirit Airlines." When you see that, immediately anyone would the alarms bells would go off, like, "Okay, this is legitimate, we should alert Spirit Airlines." But at the same time, it's a criminal, right? So you don't know if what they're doing is real or not. They might just trying to scam you into buying these credentials and it not being anything at all. So you have to understand psychology a little bit, especially darker. We have to understand, okay, we're dealing with criminals here. So they might not always be telling the truth. So I need to focus more so on the context or what they are actually selling as opposed to what they say they're selling. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's which is another fascinating part about it is like understanding, building up these personas and then following them and, watching them, how they're commenting, on different forums and kind of building a persona for this person.
Interesting. Tell me this, Mary. Tell me a success story where you did some work and you uncovered, you kept pulling the thread and you uncovered something and you prevented some attack and you just had this moment of, oh man, this feels good. I got him. Is there a success story you can tell?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and this is where I think it's so important for threat intelligence to be timely, accurate, and relevant because oftentimes most organizations have threat intelligence teams and they're monitoring for, let's say, again, I'll just use American Airlines. Okay. I'm monitoring for any dark web forum that someone's saying American Airlines, right? So I get an alert, "Oh, you're being talked about." But oftentimes these threat actors they're smart and they know how these companies operate. And so they try to be a little bit less obvious about what they're selling. And sometimes what they're selling is real credentials. Like, so you'll deal with like insider threat. So they might reach to an organization like Sony, for example, and say, "Hey, I reached an employee at Sony and ask them to give up their credentials for a certain amount of money." And that employee might do that, right? Which is actually becoming more and more common, which is something that we're thinking more about in 20 as we move to 2026 is insider threat. But from that, so they have these credentials and they're selling it online. They know not to say, "I have Sony." They'll say, "I have, big company they make this much in revenue. This is their employee account. This is where they're based. So Sony might not get that notification, right? Unless they're actively going through these forums and researching it for themselves. And by the time they do that, it might be old. Someone might have already purchased it. And that's where the timeliness comes into piece. And so I think one time, me and my team, it was a couple of years ago, we would get alerts of these threat actors just constantly posting these credentials. And we built a method of how to find exactly what this company is, right? Because it's like, okay, so now we know how you position it as employee size, where the headquarters is. So now we know we'll just have to Google headquarters companies that are making this much. This is who it's mostly like. So there was a major airlines. I won't say who it was, but someone, threat actor, put their credentials out there. They were stolen insider credentials. So someone inside the organization gave them up. Not sure how much they were selling it for, but it was, what was scary about it though is that there was, I guess, there was a lot of a lot of bids were taking place. And so you had to respond as quickly as possible. And I think what we ended up doing was contacting the airlines, letting them know about this, and they had no idea that these credentials were out there. And so then they had to take the next steps to like help stop something like this from happening. But it was kind of fascinating. It was kind of fascinating, like, whoa, like not me, but like we could have
Yeah.
stopped
You
a
were
major
part of it.
cyber attack. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was it was
Yeah.
really cool, like just seeing those credentials online.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's pretty exciting. There's so many layers to this, right? Like you said, there's the employee, right? They are a risk. They're the vendors that work with this company. They're at risk. They are just, access points, for the network that creates a risk. So there's no shortage of opportunities for someone like yourself to kind of, catch and try to prevent these things. I remember watching years ago, they were talking about, might have been in 60 Minutes or something, how they would take a jump drive and drop it in the parking lot at like this FBI or CIA, just leave it in the parking lot or leave it on a bathroom counter, you know. And for some crazy reason, people would grab these jump drives and plug them into their computers. And as soon as they do that, it's game over. They
Yeah.
get in there. Companies I've worked for in the past, it blew my mind that they would allow you to, well, one, take your own jump drive and put it into your computer.
Yeah.
This is like 10, 15 years ago, blew my mind that they would allow that. And you could download all these documents and things that you want to download, no problem. That came to an end, everything started to be getting encrypted. But it just speaks to all the layers of potential opportunities for someone to kind of get into your system. With that in mind, what are the things from your job that you bring home? What I mean by that, and for someone who's a emergency room physician, when they come home, they're probably not gonna let the kids jump on trampolines. They probably are gonna make sure that little Johnny has a helmet every time he rides his bike. They're probably gonna make sure that, they're not gonna walking around with a sharp knife in their hand, and things like that. They bring that home because they've seen what happens in the emergency room. What are those things that you bring home that you would say, "Dre, listen, if I were you, I would stop doing these things and make sure you start doing these things. Because if you know what I know, you could be at
Yeah.
risk."
Well, yeah. One thing I will say though is your both of your emails address are probably already on the dark web with
That's what everybody
your
says.
former passwords. Yeah. I've
That's
seen it
the
before because one time I was looking at my sister and I found her email address and her password and I texted it to her and she's like,
"How'd
"Oh
you
my
get
gosh,
this?"
she's like, I still use that password. Change your password." I hate use VPN on everything. Not my phone though, because it doesn't cooperate well on my phone, but like on all my laptops, computers, and then buffet on everything. Really. I know it's kind of a pain, like always having to get the text message from your phone. Some apps even require it. I think any banking apps will require the 2FA. Some people try to get around it, but that's probably um, most important. And then not trying to use the same password for
For everything.
everything, which is hard, but I think the way to make that a little bit easier is I always use I have an Apple phone, so I use their, password manager, and that really helps me, but I make sure every time I create a new password, I put it in there right away so I don't forget, with the 2FA on so that it's just, as secure as can be.
Okay. And for those listening and watching, 2FA is two-factor authentication?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
or multi-factor
Okay.
authentication.
And so passwords, obviously, you're suggesting we should change them quarterly, monthly?
I wouldn't you don't have to change them super frequently. I would just not use the same one across the
All
different, so not
platform.
yeah, so not same one for Facebook as Netflix. Like, you wanna diversify those up a little bit.
Okay. And then the VPN. So talk to me about the benefit of having a VPN. And for those listening and watching, virtual private network.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me
Um,
about the benefit of that.
well, basically, it's kind of like it makes it a little bit more anonymous for you, right? So
Mhm.
it blocks your IP address because your IP address is like, tracking everything that you're doing online. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
the VPN will hide it to make it a little less anonymous for you. But it's not the same as Tor. Tor is a different level. This is just like a level under it.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense. And someone once explained a VPN to me like this, and tell me if this is fairly accurate. Right now, if you're just going to the internet, you're kind of broadcasting everything you're doing. It's just, it's just being spread out to the world. They know which sites you're going to, what you're doing, how you're doing. VPN is kind of a tunnel that you only have access to. So all of your traffic goes through this tunnel, the VPN tunnel, and so it's not seen as easily. Is that fair?
Yes, yes, that's perfect.
Okay. Okay.
Will say though, but I don't want people to think that it's completely even though it's your own tunnel, the a company that owns the VPN has access into it. So you don't want to be doing anything illegal because, they often will work with law enforcement. So if someone is doing something
Okay, let me
illegal.
write that down. Do not do anything illegal, even if you're on the VPN, right? Even if
Yeah,
you're on the
yeah.
okay. Got it, got it, got it. And then the next one I'll pass it over to Smiley. Talk to me about what you're doing to kind of promote women in this space and help women that are already in this space to kind of build a network, where all of
Yeah.
you kind of connect and thrive.
I will say in cyber threat intelligence specifically, there's probably more women than across any of the other cyber factors. And I think partly behind that is because of the fact, as I mentioning earlier, CTI does involve having some understanding of like psychology, right? And so I think women bring a very good perspective when it comes to tracking these threat actors and trying to understand these different personas just to see, to predict who their next target will be. On the same hand, though, threat intelligence is only effective if it's being shared. So if companies or individuals are gatekeeping their intel, then it's not helping the public as a whole. And there have been many times where something could have been stopped, attack could have been stopped if the intel was shared it was shared to the appropriate stakeholders. And so that's kind of where I think I see because we have at our organization, we run one of the largest CTI open source cyber threat intelligence Slack groups. And if you look through all the channels, it's heavily male dominated, right? And so because of that, you always wonder like, okay, is it just because there's not enough women in the space? No, there's women in the space, but maybe they just don't feel maybe it's a little intimidating, with all these men's perspective, and then maybe it's a little intimidating for a woman to speak up, right, or say something. And so the whole purpose, we created Women in CTI to have a channel designated for women to let them feel more of like mentorship, ways to share intel, help each other out, and then also to feel more, I guess, like confident going into these other sharing channels because if women aren't sharing the threat intelligence they have, that's a major impact, right? Even on lives too as well. So it's incredibly important to have, something like this where we can make sure every voice is being heard in this space.
The question I wanted to circle back to is if someone sold their credentials and they work for a big company, is that the first step in the ransomware process?
Yeah, it's there's a million different reasons why someone would want to purchase those credentials. I think if you were looking at it from a ransomware perspective, someone is very privileged in an organization, has a lot of access into different sites. Let's say a bad threat actor group might look at that person and say, I need those credentials because by gaining those credentials, it helps them gain access into the organization where they can ultimately, their goal most of the time is to, put ransomware on the organization because they're all financially motivated groups. So that's probably, and you've probably heard of like social engineering before. like social engineering in order to gain those credentials. Sometimes some people give it up willingly. Oftentimes, most often, this case, I think, with especially what's happened in Vegas, it was by accident. The person called, pretended that they were accessing, that they were working for the IT department in Vegas, and the person was like, "Okay, here you go. Here are the credentials," without confirming that they were who they said they were.
Oh. The famous hack that I recall, and I talked to it with some of my neighbors here, is when Jeff Bezos got hacked a couple years ago. And it just says if the hackers can get to Jeff,
Well, so that's the thing is I don't know too much details behind it, but I will say though is Jeff Bezos is still human, right? He
yeah,
makes mistakes. Also, sometimes egos are involved. People might say things they shouldn't say. This is actually how we get threat actors most of the time is because they're very braggadocious, like, they wanna brag about certain credentials that they have, and so those people are the easiest for us to track down because they're talking a lot. And so, I think with Jeff Bezos, he's human, he probably made a couple slip-ups, maybe, said a couple things he probably shouldn't have said that someone picked up and was able to gain access into it.
wow. You mentioned that we're probably on the dark web. Who would want us? Or what value would they get from the Dre and Smiley Inner Circle
Hey,
podcast? I was
Smiley,
like,
if they try and rob me, they'll just be practicing.
that's what I'm thinking. It's
They'll pull,
like
they'll pull up, they'll pull up my account and be like, "Oh, this is a waste of time."
they might
No.
make deposits in my account. Like,
Right,
oh,
right.
let me just donate some money.
Hey, Johnny, let's help these guys out. They're struggling. But to Smiley's point, I was reading somewhere that just assume all of your information is already on the dark web. So then I wonder, okay, so is it just sitting there and they're waiting for the right opportunity to grab it and use it? Like, what do I do? What should I think about it?
Well, no, but I do think for like, the average person, there's not really much you can do. As I mentioned, you just have to it's like common sense, just change your passwords, enable TFA, stuff like that. But I will say like for like various celebrities or executives at big firms, what they'll do is they'll hire analysts to go online and open source, dark web, deep web, see if they could build up kind of like pretending, see if you can find my house, where my kids go to school, what car I'm driving. If you were planning attack, how would you do it? And they would hire someone to do that. And most of the time, just analysts working in the company can easily do that. They can set up blueprint. They'll see where their CEO works, where their kids go to school, what cars they're driving, how many cars they have, how many houses they have. And they do that in order to be more proactive, right? So that they know, okay, these are my vulnerabilities, these are my weak spots, this is where I need to fix up. Because the more information that's out there, especially at that level, more dangerous it can be used against you.
Is it possible to scrape the internet of all your information, or is it kind of like playing whack-a-mole if you try to do that?
Yeah, I have talked about this with my friends sometimes because there's like sites that they can claim to remove like your email addresses or something from the dark web. It's not I wouldn't waste your time doing that because it's like, first of all, you have to be able to purchase those email addresses off of there. And then you don't know if they've been recycled before or if someone else, you don't know who else has purchased them. And then if they're being recycled again, then someone else is uploading them. Even with like different domains, you have to email the domain multiple times, say, can you please remove, this PII information for me, and we don't know. It's you never get a sure guarantee. So there's no point in trying. And I shouldn't say that, but I'm like, I really don't think you should waste your time trying to do something like that.
The juice isn't worth the squeeze. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
So before we go to the final four, here's a question for you. What keeps you excited about CTI, like going forward?
There's so many changes happening right now, especially with AI, and there's so much uncertainty right now. I think we don't know how the world is going to change within the next 5 years.
Mm.
We have no idea what's going to happen. So for in the CTI world, it's a little scary, but it's very, kind of fascinating to follow, because you're trying to, because, the whole purpose is you're trying to be one step ahead of these bad actors. And so, I think it's exciting that we have so many new opportunities in the new year to focus on what type of, how we can use this AI to do better ourselves with our work. I think one thing I'm very scared about, though, is insider threat. As more companies or as more individuals become, disgruntled or unhappy at their workplaces, they're not going to have loyalty to their company. Like, what? It's not going to take much for a threat actor to say, "Hey, I can give you this amount of money if you give me your credentials to this site," right? And I think that's where the scariness kind of plays into that. So we'll have to figure out, and that just the shift of the political environment as well, right? Um, we'll have to see how that changes within the next couple of years.
Makes sense.
Before we go into the final four, Mary, is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about? Or
Yes, so we do have a women in cyber threat intelligence group. We're a Slack channel right now. We'll be having some events coming up this year. I think definitely one in Vegas for the big Black Hat cybersecurity convention.
let's say there's a sophomore in high school or a sophomore in college, and they're listening, a male or female, and they're like, "I want to get into cybersecurity. What's step one, two, and three? Should they download a Chat GPT and say I want to be a CTI, or do you recommend they take a certain community college class or any class, or what's the step if they
Yeah.
say, man, I want to be what Mary does?
So I go to a lot of conferences and I always run into students and I love meeting students that are so excited about wanting to be in cyber. I think the best place for me, I think it would be if you're really, really passionate about it, try to get into some of these different conferences, try to network with folks in cyber. You can take courses as well. There's some very good courses out there. But I would start with the very basics. I wouldn't do anything super specific at this time, just so you can have an understanding of where you would want to fall in cyber, but definitely get yourself out there and meeting other people because I've worked with a lot of students in the past, especially I did one with these students that were focusing on like a dark web project that they made. It was really fun working with them. Fun just seeing how excited they were about the project.
Yeah.
So yeah, just get out there. You can also message me on LinkedIn as well. I'm more than happy to help.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, we're getting ready to move into the final four.
And
How's that for high tech?
Yeah. So Mary, the first final four question is, what is something that or here it is. Who is someone alive or dead that you would want to meet for 24 hours, alive or dead, and why?
probably, I mean, I feel like the most obvious answer is Jesus. I think, he's the most influential person in the world, especially back at that time. I would just love to just spend 24 hours understanding, hearing it from his mouth, his preachings, what he's taught.
Okay,
Yeah, I love that. Love that.
me too.
What's the biggest risk you've ever taken?
Probably getting into cyber and the dark web threat intel space. My background, as I mentioned, my background wasn't cyber. My background was marketing, and I had to basically make a big bet on myself because it's kind of like, I'm like, am I smart enough for this? Will I be able to figure this stuff out? Am I very far behind because everyone else who I'm working with has all these degrees and education behind it? But I basically just had to jump into it, full confidence, um, and hoped that it worked. And it ended up working. Yeah.
Nice.
Here's one.
Yeah.
Switch gears on you a little bit. What is something that never fails to make you laugh? I mean, tears coming out your eyes, holding your side, you just can't stop laughing.
Oh. Um, I I love I just love humor in general. I find most things make me laugh easily. I have 8 siblings, and so we have a group chat, and
I would
whenever
love to
I
see that.
Are you the oldest or the baby? Where are you in
I'm
the
the
age?
middle. I'm the middle. But that group chat just cracks me. It's so bad because 'cause I'm, like, being in an important meeting, and my phone will pop up, and I see something in the message, and I know I shouldn't look at it because 'cause I'm gonna start laughing, but I just wanna see what it is, and I can't stop smiling, and it's over this stupid it doesn't even the humor is so dumb, it doesn't even make sense, but it's just because it's, like, the siblings. Um,
Yeah.
How are you?
yeah.
So I have two older siblings and three younger ones. But the challenge is
Okay.
you're never in the house at the same time because
Yeah.
they're so young, and
Yep.
so the youngest 2 were there together, but the rest of us, we were rolling off to college, rolling off to our adulthood.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you
was
get
there
it.
ever a time where all 8 of you were in the house at the same time?
It was always chaos. My oldest brother, I think, is 43, and my youngest brother is 25. There's a huge
Also, yeah.
age gap between them, but there was, I think, most of, like, my middle school and high school, there was 6 of us, 6 siblings living in a house together. We had 1 bathroom.
Real quick story. When I was in college, a buddy of mine I worked with, we were at work and he asked for a ride home. I said, yeah, no problem. So I'm taking my time, getting myself together. He's like, Dre, man, we got to go. I'm like, all right, let's go. Dre, we got to go. I'm like, all right. So I'm writing, I'm like, dude, what's the hurry? So he comes from a family of 7. I was like, what's the hurry? He's like, "Dre, if you're not home at dinner time, you don't eat. I'm like,
Yeah,
did
exactly.
did I save it a plate for you?
People to this day, people don't understand, like, my and this is something I've been working on a lot is, like, trying to slow down when I eat, but when I eat with other people, I get extremely stressed out because I'm so worried, and I know there's more food, but it's just, like, it's in me from such a young age, like, 'cause
Yeah.
boys would eat so much faster and they'd
Yeah.
go up for seconds, and so
Yeah.
yeah, it was yeah, that
It
it
was it's
sticks with you.
survival is what you're, yeah.
Well, my friend, his son, he has 6 kids, and his son is the oldest boy, and it's 5 girls. He's a he learned to just shower. He showers the night before, and he has to do everything before the women get into the bathroom because it's
It's
like
a
5
wrap.
hours. He'll never get
Yeah.
in. He needs to navigate his sisters because and they only have,
Yeah.
like, I think 1 bathroom, and he just figured it
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Final 4 question is, what's one thing most people don't know about you that you wish they did?
Oof, that's a hard question. I think I have a little bit not too much of a nerdy side. I have a little bit of a nerdy side, so I do like in terms of, like, books, I do like some fantasy books. I love The Lord of the Rings. I love Harry Potter, um, and some of the most recent fantasy books out there. Uh, but I don't really share that. I always only share, like, the nonfiction books that I'm into. So, whenever I hear someone talking about these different books, I get really excited about it. So, that's
So
really it.
how accurate was my Middle Earth analogy to your web
Oh, I was like,
description?
"Ooh, yes."
Oh, so you saw that. Oh, look at that. I love Frodo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Kindred spirits there. Yeah,
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 that's
yeah,
super
yeah,
cool,
yeah.
man.
That's
It's
all
more
right.
like, but you know what? Listening to this dark web is more like Game of Thrones, and
Yeah,
that's what it was more like. Because you got some, if you could get into the mind and the psyche of all the wildlings, the
yeah,
Dothrakis, and all those different characters and personas in Game of Thrones,
exactly.
that's the dark web and cyber threat right there.
Yeah,
The guy
yeah,
figured it out.
exactly.
Wow.
So, well, Mary, like I said at the start, this topic is one that's Smiley and I are passionate about. We enjoy talking about cybersecurity. It's so mysterious, like I mentioned. Thank you for demystifying it for us and breaking it down. I feel like I have a really good, clear understanding of what I need to do on my own to help kind of protect myself a bit. I did have some anxiety when I read that my information is probably out there on the web. After sharing what you've shared, I feel like that anxiety has decreased a bit because there's some things I can do that will help protect me. So, with all that said, for those listening and watching, we'll associate both links in our show notes for those that are watching and listening. Mary, thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much.